Hey there guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Shivank and I'm currently a third year medical student at Imperial College London, and today's video is all about how I scored all A stars at A level. I took the subjects maths, biology, chemistry and the EPQ, and I'll be providing advice on how I got A stars in all of these subjects, with what tips I used and what resources I used. So without further ado, let's get started. So firstly, I want to talk about my overall revision guide. This is split into three different sections. Firstly, it's about understanding the content. Secondly, it's about testing yourself. And thirdly, about recalling the content before your final exams. So let's start off firstly with understanding the content. So understanding the content is where the bulk majority of your time will be spent. And as obvious as it sounds, it simply means being able to grasp. If someone asks you what is the chemical formula for this, you'll be like, okay, I know instantly because you've learned it before. And that's simply what this is. So the best way to do this is by attending your lessons. So let's say you attend your lesson and the topic in chemistry is about bonding and structure. So this is where the teacher will provide you notes, or you make notes based on the PowerPoint slides, however it works in your school. But at the end of the lesson, you'll have 1 or 2 pages of notes based on a specific topic. In the actual lesson, you'll probably only understand 40 to maybe 50% of what's actually being taught. A lot of it will go over your head, a lot of it can be quite complex to understand. But here's something I want you to do in the next lesson. Even if it's something that you do understand, just ask a question to the teacher. This way, it not only shows that you're paying attention to the teacher, but it also forces your brain to work to come up with questions which can help you find things that you don't really know. For example, something specific such as, oh, miss, what is that exact topic that you talk about? What is the specific key word that you mentioned here? What do you think is relevant for the exams? Questions like these will create buzzwords in your head so that you know, okay, I remember asking the teacher this question, so I know it's an important topic. And that's something that I quite like doing, because by asking questions, it forced me to learn, because obviously you can't just ask a random question if you haven't been paying attention in class. And it also helped me remember it when it came to the exam, because I remembered, oh, I asked the teacher this question. So now you've understood, let's say 50 to 60%, because you've been asking questions and you've been actively making notes, paying attention in class. So now, how do we consolidate this? This is where free periods or supervised independent learning periods come into play. So in our school, we had periods where we could consolidate our learning, or essentially periods where we could take what we've learned and then revise it. And I think this was really helpful, because let's say we learn a topic on Monday in period 1 and we fully don't understand it. In our free periods, we would then look over this topic and then try and read our notes or try and test ourselves. So a strategy that many students quite like using is blurting. It's where you just cover up the notes and then you just write down everything that you remember, look back at your notes and then annotate it in a different color. I think this is a perfect way to memorize. For me personally, what I quite like doing is rereading the notes again, because I didn't understand it instantly in the first go. So I'd reread it and then I would look at a YouTube video to try and get a different angle. And there's loads of different videos out there, whether it's for maths, whether it's for chemistry, etc. There's loads of good YouTube videos which will really help consolidate your learning. But anyways, now you've done your first revision. So you not only learned the content, but you also revised it, whether it's doing past papers, whether it's blurting, whether it's watching a YouTube video. That is your second revision done of the content. Now, let's talk about the second section, the idea of testing yourself. So how do I go about this? Now, the best way to do this is through past papers. I think this is really good, because with past papers, it really helps solidify your knowledge and really helps apply it to questions which you get asked in the actual exam. And what I like doing, if I find it's a topic that I'm really struggling with and I just don't understand, I would do past papers the same day I've learned the content. This way, it forces me to actively recall what I've learned the same day, and it's still fresh in my head. So that way I won't forget as much, and I'll also be able to understand, oh, this is what the past paper explains, and explains it in a better way than the teacher did perhaps, or explains it in a different way the teacher did that's more memorable. And I think that's really key, because by doing past papers, you learn what the examiner is really looking out for, and you're able to pick up on keywords that are present in every single past paper. Furthermore, if it's a topic which you feel, okay, I'm quite confident at it, I don't feel the need that I need to do a past paper instantly, that's perfectly fine. Let's say you learn a topic on Monday. What I quite like doing was doing a past paper on the weekend. So the weekend following, so on Saturday and Sunday, I would then do a past paper on the topic I've learned on Monday. I would end up scoring not as high, but at least I know, okay, so this is what I got wrong, this is the keywords that I should do, and just highlight those keywords and then create a folder of that. That's it. That was your first 2 steps done. You've not only learned the content once, revised it again, so that's 2 revisions, and then you've also tested yourself. So now you've got a really solid understanding of the content that you've just learned on Monday in a week. Now, section 3, exams. So in our school, what was really good, and in the time I didn't find it as good, was we had quite frequent exams. By having quite frequent exams, it forces us to recall the knowledge that we've learned and apply it to real questions that could be asked in our final exams. This way, it forces us to keep using our content again and again and again. If your school does not provide this, then that's perfectly fine. You can create questions yourself. There's past papers online, so you can just start doing past papers, the older ones ideally, because if you use newer ones, then towards the actual exams, you won't have new content left. So better to do old past papers, and then you can just test yourself weekly, monthly, etc. at your own pace. This way, it forces yourself to learn and recall knowledge. And finally, before your final exams, the best way to learn revision is look over your content, try and blurt it out, as many people quite like doing it. For me personally, I like doing a past paper instantly without learning any of the content because I've already learned it once, then revised it again before, so it should be quite fresh in my head. So I'll just do a past paper. Even if I get 60-70%, I'm quite happy with that because I know that I remember a decent amount. Then I would look at my content and be like, okay, why did I not get this right? Why did I get this wrong? What could I have done differently? Revisit that with my notes and then do questions again. This way, it would force me to get a higher mark and make me feel better in a sense because I know like, okay, so without revising, I got 60-70%. I've learned my content now, and now I'm scoring 80-90%, which I think is really great. So those are the three main steps I would say. So I'll summarize that again. Firstly, understand your content. So pay attention in your lessons, ask as many questions as you can. Then review the content by doing questions or watching a YouTube video or just looking at a different angle, whether it's through a CGP guide. And then thirdly, just make sure you regularly test yourself, whether it's with past papers, whether it's just blurting it out weekly or monthly. And then when the final exams come, just do past papers again and again and again. That's the one thing you hear me say throughout this video is doing past papers because I think that's really good. So now let's talk about subject specific and how I think you can score best in maths, biology, chemistry, and EPQ. So let's start with biology. So I achieved A star in biology, and I would say this was my most challenging one. This is because with the mark schemes, I feel like they change every single time you do a paper. Every single time they're like, okay, this keyword is more important than this one. No, actually I lied, it's this one, which is really difficult. But the best way to do this is by first making sure you have a good understanding of the content. If you have a good understanding of the content, then when the questions they ask aren't usually the hardest, but they're there to try and catch you out. They'll include 1 or 2 words here and there, which you're like, oh, I don't really know what that means. So if you know your content first, really good. Secondly, I think this is the most important biology, is making sure you read the question. Because you can talk so long, let's say it's about transcription, translation. You can talk so long and so long about transcription, and all of it could be right. But if the question asked, oh, so we know the steps of transcription, could you please tell me the steps of translation? And then you just talked all about transcription and you forgot that there's translation, you would get 0. Biology is very harsh in the sense that if you don't meet any of the mark scheme points, you will not get it. There's no working out marks, etc. So that's why I think it's really key that you read the question. I also think that unlike other subjects where you could get away with waffling or talking a lot, you cannot get away with that in biology. In biology, if you only have a few points, but you're hitting the mark scheme on the dot, you will get the points. So don't be writing loads and loads and loads, hoping that at least one of those points will be right, because not only will you be wasting time, but you'll also be talking about stuff which isn't relevant. So the best way to do this is learn content and just start doing past papers. By doing past papers, you'll be able to identify at least the broad concepts of what you need to know. Then you can work on, instead of waffling for answers, you can then work on shortening your answers, which is what I did. I used to write less, even if it didn't fit in all in the box, but make sure that the points I'm writing are concise and really good. Because that way it forces me to use my best vocabulary or best biological vocabulary, I would say, in order to score the best possible marks. Okay, so now let's focus on chemistry. So chemistry was one of my favorite subjects and something which came more intuitively to me, as I must admit. But with chemistry, 50% I would say is just practicing. So there's a lot of calculation-based equations. So there's some of it you have to memorize. And since I do medicine, I'm quite good at memorization, I would like to say. And the best way I found with memorization is to, with the equations, is look at it once and then not memorize it, but just use that equation again and again by doing those questions. This way, you're not memorizing, but you're forcefully using it repeatedly. So that way, it basically engraves in your head. And so when you come near to the exam and you start doing questions again, then you'll be like, oh, I remember this equation. How does it go? Okay, it's n equals this, this, this. And that's what's really good. So I think the best way to do that is just by practicing, and it's mostly same for all subjects. With chemistry, what I really like is a lot of it is really linked and it does make logical sense. So I would say if you don't understand something, spend some time tracing your steps back and explain understanding why. Like whether it's something basic such as oil rig, oxidation is loss of electrons, reduction is gain of electrons. That's something that can really help. So some like acronyms really help me learn basic concepts, and just taking a step back and watching a YouTube video, spending a bit more time on a topic. Because once you understand a basic concept, you will never forget it. I think that's what's really good, because that basic concept will form the foundation for a lot of complex topics within chemistry, and there are a lot. But if you know the basics of it, then you can slowly lead your way up and be able to understand it. I think that's what's really key. So now let's talk about maths. So maths is quite a different section, I would say, compared to biology and chemistry, because there's so much you can do with past papers if you don't. Whereas with biology and chemistry, it's more about specific key terms, specific questions, etc., etc. Whereas with maths, it's more about just doing past papers. It's very important that, so we had a fat textbook that had a lot of content on it, and in that textbook it had a lot of questions and had a couple of pages explaining what it is. So let's say something simple like the nth term. You can just learn what the nth term is, understand the concept, and then just start doing questions. And I think that's the best way for A level. The A level is just practicing. The more you practice, the better it is. Some useful guides which really help for maths, and I can show on the screen right here, were really good. And so make sure you make the most of whatever resources the school gives, because the school ultimately want you to do the best. So not only it looks good for the school, but also for you. Something that I would recommend is PMT as well, because PMT gave really good resources that are completely free to use and will help you achieve the best marks. And finally, let's talk about the EPQ. So EPQ is completely different to all of this. So in our school, we had specific timetable slots around 1 hour a week just discussing about the EPQ, which is really good. But the best way to do this is to have some sort of inspiration. So for me, my EPQ was on high altitude. And you might be wondering, where would you get inspiration of high altitude from? And this was because I went to a talk about high altitude, which I found really intriguing. I just found it really inspiring how they've used resources at high altitude and how the body adapts to increased red blood cell production, so increased erythropoietin response at high altitude, and how athletes can harness this to use the increased red blood cells and then come down and then run in a race, and there'll be better advantages than other athletes because they have more red blood cells. Something like that was something which was really interesting to me, and I thought this is a perfect topic to talk about. Now, with EPQ, there's a lot of exemplars as well, which I think is good to a limit. I think it's good because it gives you an idea of how to come up with a question, but it's also bad in a sense because many people just copy it, change the thing. So for example, does drug X work better than drug Y? People will just write topics saying does drug A work better than drug B? Which in a sense will get you the marks, but A, it'll be very boring, and B, it'll take a lot of time because you'll essentially be just checking again and again with the exemplar to see if it matches what you've written. So that's why I think it's better to pick something you're more interested in, because that way you'll be able to find more compelling evidence, more research about it, and when the teacher asks you to present the content, then you'll be like, okay, I know a lot about this, and if they throw a curveball at me about high altitude, I'll be able to answer it because I've done research on it. The best thing as well with the EPQ is having a plan. I think having a plan of what you want to write, even if it's 1 or 2 sentences for every paragraph, really does help. And something which isn't emphasized as much and which I learned the hard way is just add your references as you go along. I did not, and so I spent such a long time at the end trying to find every single thing that I wrote and be like, okay, which resources did I get it from, where did I use it, etc. So that would have saved me a lot of time. So make sure that you just link your resources and just note it down as you go along. Even if it does take a bit of time at the beginning, at the end it will save a lot of time. And that's it. I think that's all the tips I have for this video. If you are interested in wanting specific tips for every single subject, whether it's maths, biology, chemistry, I'll be happy to do so in future videos. But without further ado, thank you guys for watching and stay tuned.